The NFL draft is right around the corner. The Kansas City Chiefs have some decisions to make because they can fill some significant holes on their roster in this draft while they missed out on a couple others. We're going to dig all into the details. Where do they go from here on today's Locked On Chiefs?
From the land of the free and the home of the Chiefs, this is the Locked On Chiefs podcast.
Welcome back, friends and neighbors. This is Locked On Chiefs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day for free on every platform, starting with YouTube and everywhere else you can find it. That's the place to go. Like, sub, and hit that bell if you would. Thanks for making us your first listen. Check out another Locked On show for your next one, including Locked On NFL Scouting. You can get more and more information on this draft class as we tick down now 17 days. It is coming quick. You can find all of my work at rogueapc.com. Right now, you can get a significant discount on the draft guide that drops tomorrow. If you get over there and use the code MATRIXLOC, you can get that right now at rogueapc.com. You can also see a lot of articles and written information at NFL33.com, as well as RGR Football.
And I'm Chris Clark. Thank you all for listening. We do appreciate it. And you can find me over at Chiefs Corner. A lot going on prepping for the draft and getting ready for this draft that's coming up. Kansas City does have some holes that they should be filling. They did have a signing last week, which I don't really think moves the needle any on their needs. But other than maybe they have somebody else that can return punts and kicks.
Right.
That might be.
And that's a significant hole, right? Like, you want to be able to make sure that you have that base covered, right?
Yep. So, I mean, I guess you could look at it from that perspective. They have another guy that can compete there. Although I do think that after what we saw from Sky Moore in the playoffs, maybe he's going to be one. Maybe they're going to want him to be the guy that's going to be returning punts again this year.
Well, let's not go that far. I mean,
we'll see. He seemed to like it.
Season. He did.
Yeah,
Okay.
He got better at the end, so we'll see.
I can't argue. That's fair. But I think what you're talking about in adding another player that is well down the depth chart, down the roster, maybe not even a candidate, like you said, for the 53. We'll see how it all shakes out. But that is, again, part of this process of covering the gaps in case. The big development over the weekend, obviously, was surprise of all places. The one that has like an unsettled quarterback future, Odell Beckham Jr. signs with the Ravens of all places. And I think what it gives you an insight. Thank you. Yes, if you're not seeing us live on YouTube, folks, or check out the video, because Chris is doing exactly what I would be doing if I was in his place too, and not actually setting this up, because that's what it comes down to. I believe that it would work out like 18 total in incentives, right? 15 base.
Yeah, 15 guaranteed.
I mean, that tells me one of two things. The Chiefs had an interest. We know that was established. We know that they even made an offer, but it was nowhere near 15. That's not in the realm of possibility for this particular roster on a player that missed last season with an ACL, right? That tells me also that they were looking for someone who was ready to buy into the program and be here for the team and fill that gap as a number one wide receiver in terms of this team needing it to drive the offense forward and take on another championship run. What does that tell you about Odell Beckham, or do you disagree with anything?
I don't necessarily disagree. I will say that I find it interesting because the Ravens have currently $6 million in cap space before the Odell Beckham signing. So do the math on that. What it really comes down to is they're going to be doing void years. They're going to have to do void years. I don't know how many they're going to end up doing. I did not see that be announced, but they're going to have to do void years. And at this point, from what it could be, they could do basically $3 million a year for the next 5 years. The problem with that is that you basically kick $12 million into the next year's cap if you don't re-sign him.
Yeah, that certainly is problematic.
And don't quote me on the numbers. I haven't looked at the exact contract. That's just based off of what I think I've seen.
But it's significant, and I don't argue with you at all. And I think what that tells you is that significant of a contract was not in the cards. The Chiefs need to get something done in an alternate way, and I think that shows us where they're drawing the line.
Yeah, and the other part of it is since he didn't play last year, any not likely to be earned incentives aren't going to count against the cap this year. So they could put his not likely to be earned incentives very, very low, and he could easily hit them, and that'd be another $3 million you'd have to account for.
Yeah, And it just starts adding up. It's a snowball effect. So what I see them doing and what this says is they are very, very confident in being able to do one of two things or both. In that, not looking for that star right now. We'll see. Maybe that story changes if DeAndre Hopkins actually gets released. We're waiting on that too. Rumor is right now there could be a trade still in the works for draft night. We'll find that out later. But that leaves the Kansas City Chiefs able to round out the wide receiver room and give themselves not just options that could be kick returners or could fill the bottom of the top 6, but someone that can push for the top 3. That is going to come in either the draft or a post-draft acquisition of a player that maybe gets released because of a draft pick or a player that gets traded because of a draft pick, that kind of thing. And that they're pretty comfortable with that. I'm okay if they're okay. How do you feel?
The one thing I will say on DeAndre Hopkins really quick is him being traded draft night really just does not make sense to me, because you have to take care of his contract. And you have so many moving parts. I mean, if you're working on getting a deal done now and it hasn't broke, nobody's been talking about it, maybe you are able to get a deal done on draft night. But the reality is you've got to figure out his contract situation. And he's on the books for $30 million over the next 2 years, I believe, something like that. That's significant. It's not as easy to trade that type of player as it is, a guy that's still on his rookie deal. So it's going to be hard for Kansas City to be able to make that work unless they've already started talking about numbers and all of that to try to get it reestablished. But we'll see. As far as I'm concerned, wide receivers probably pretty close to their number one need right now.
I can see that.
I think you look at what they have in that room, and I like what Tony brings. I like what Sky Moore can bring, but both of them didn't play big roles in the Chiefs offense last year. MVS did play a big role in the Chiefs offense, but was inconsistent. So you hope he takes a big step forward in year 2, but he's the veteran in the room right now, and they all got to be following him. I just look at this draft, and if they're not going to trade up for a wide receiver, they're going to have a hard time getting somebody I think that can step in and start. And that's what they really need, is somebody that can step in and maybe not even start, maybe just somebody that can play, 50% of the snaps or 40% of the snaps year 1 versus what they've been doing with Sky Moore and guys like that in the past.
Yeah, where you're just patching them in. I can see where you're coming from. I'm not quite sold on that philosophy yet, only because of the quality of this wide receiver class. It comes to me in terms of availability, and that's how you stack them out. What are the tiers? We're going to talk about that after this message, because that's exactly how the Chiefs have to plan in how you acquire and fill that hole, as well as a couple of others, with where you stack the board. And my board will be available on NFL33.com for free. It will be unlocked as soon as I put it up. That'll be after the draft guide comes out and everything else. But that's going to be a big conversation, one that you might want to lay some action on. Where goes who? Because right now you can look at draft picks, you can look at grand slams, no hitters, doubles, plays. Baseball is in full swing, and you can get into the action on the MLB and everywhere else from FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Right now, they're still giving new customers, you can step up to the plate, so to speak, with a no-sweat first bet for up to $1,000 in bonus bets applied to your account if your first bet doesn't win. It's a similar deal to what we had during March Madness, what we had during the NBA run here, and now MLB's getting in on the action too. So check that out. All you got to do is go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. You can see that below here and place your first bet. If that doesn't win, you can get up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if it doesn't go. So don't miss your chance at a no-sweat first bet for up to $1,000 in bonus bets today at FanDuel. All you got to do is go to FanDuel.com/lockedon and sign up. Make every moment more. FanDuel, the official sportsbook betting partner of MLB, NBA, and the NFL. Now, tiers are where this comes in. I am skeptical, I have to say. There's been a little bit of rumor lately. I think it was it Feldman or Sando did a straw poll of NFL executives who seem to be kind of landing where I am, where there's certainly gaps, and we'll identify some of the concepts around what the Chiefs can do. But right now, I am struggling to put 3 guys in the first round from the wide receiver position. And my board is not stacked yet. We're finishing up the draft guide. Again, folks, that should be out tomorrow, Wednesday morning at the latest. And that's where it becomes a question of value. Like you said, that might be their biggest need. Obviously, we still have tackle, we still have edge, but it's about volume and where is in that tier above 31. For me, there's one guy I know for certain, And the others are question marks to me right now. And if the NFL agrees with me, does that change your perception about how they have to go about acquiring a fit, someone to fill that gap, depending on what if there is only 2 wide receivers that are worth a first round grade?
Well, it's going to be interesting because I think that who ends up going in the first round doesn't necessarily mean they have a first round grade. And I say that because I do not think that you're going to see only 2 wide receivers taken in the first round. I think you're going to see 3, maybe 4, quite honestly. Whether or not Kansas City feels they're a first round pick, that's another story. Whether or not you feel like they're first round pick, no offense. I'm just saying, I mean, everybody feels differently about players, but we see it every year. Teams trade up to go get guys that they think are going to be the guy, and they fall in love with somebody. And then, a couple of years down the line, it either works out or it doesn't. So we'll see if that happens. I still think that there's probably 3 or 4 that go in the first round. I would be surprised if there isn't, just because of the wide receiver market and how important that has become over the past couple of seasons. Mm-hmm. And then you start looking at the guys, really the one that I think that easily can be said should be a first round pick is, Jackson Smith-Njigba. The rest of them, maybe. I mean,
JSN's a shoe-in. You're absolutely right.
Right.
For me, it's Jordan Anderson, Quentin Johnson. Do they belong there? Because they're pretty low. They're in the mid-20s for me right now.
That's what I'm saying. And do they belong in the first round? If you only have 17 players graded in the first round, you're going to have some of those other guys that are going to get taken at the bottom. And you may end up having some people that actually just like what Quentin Johnson does, and they believe that they can fix what he is, and maybe he gets drafted in the top 10 or 15. Not saying it should happen, but it happens every year. We didn't expect Olave to get drafted as high as he did last year.
Yeah, absolutely. And that comes.
I'm not saying he's not a good wide receiver. I'm just saying we just didn't expect him to get traded up to go get.
Obviously not. And that's why these clusters, these tiers appear. And so that's for the Chiefs. What they have to concentrate on is it doesn't have to be one of the top 3, or if they only have a first round grade on one guy, it doesn't have to be that guy, because likely someone else is going to come get in your way and take them ahead of time. So the question becomes is, in the second group, in the third group, in the fourth tier, who can do the job for you?
I would almost argue, though, are there any other wide receivers in this class that you feel like could step in and learn Kansas City's offense and start, or at least get to 30 or 40% of the snaps year one, other than JSN?
I do. I think Jordan Addison can play every position on the field right now. I have no doubt. My problem is he's not as explosive in USC's offense, which should have been more than he was in Pittsburgh's offense. So he was my wide receiver 1 through most of the season, but he didn't fulfill that. And he's not as sudden as JSN is either. He's still got a little bit better speed over the top, but he's not as sudden. And that is weighing on me right now. But as you go down that line, then it becomes Quentin can't step in there. From everything that I've seen, he's not going to have the acumen to jump into the offense in full speed. Say Flowers runs a number of routes from a number of positions. You want to think that you can project him there, but that's not a shoe-in either. The list goes on and on. So there's really 2 guys that I could project that, they can probably walk in and get it done at 40 or 50%. I don't think there's a number 1 wide receiver in this class right now compared to Kansas City's offense in their roster.
Well, you and I disagree on JSN, but I get it. I look at his skill set and think he can be a number 1 in this offense, mainly because of the way he is able to get open and always find holes for his QB. I think that is a huge thing that doesn't get talked about enough when you start looking at wide receivers, especially in this offense.
But you got to be careful, because he's always had a number 1 over the top of him. He's always had an Olave, or he's always had a Garrett Wilson, or Harrison Jr. You know what I mean? He's always been the second option. He doesn't have to be the carrying the load WR1.
Well, and he wouldn't have to be the WR1. I mean, he'd have to not necessarily be the WR1 starting this next season, because that's still going to be Travis Kelce. So he would have room to grow into it. But I agree with you. I mean, there's question marks with every player, and that's probably one of them with him. But you're getting a player that's coming from basically a wide receiver in a lot of ways. Ohio State has a lot of good wide receivers that have come out, and I feel comfortable with that position. With him at that position, the question is how high up would you have to go get him? And you'd have to give up a lot of capital probably to do it.
Yeah, it does feel like moving around this draft is going to be a little bit more expensive than we thought. Given what's going on in the top 5, I'm not sure that's even over.
But that's the even bigger question is it sounds like there could be 4 QBs going in the top 5. Arizona's talking about moving out. There's a lot of question marks as to how all this is going to play out. So if 4 QBs go in the top 5, obviously it's going to push other players down. I'm going to be shocked if 4 QBs go in the top 5, but it is the most important position. I don't think that you're going to get value for those top 4.
Well, that's fair. And every quarterback that goes up high pushes the tiers down, whether it's the wide receiver or we're going to talk about the edges and the tackles next and how they all fit together and where those tiers align so we can see what the Chiefs can get done to fix these gaps that still exist in the roster. We'll do that after a message from our pals.
And this is one of the things that I really enjoyed earlier in this offseason, that we got a chance to play and we got a chance to have the sponsor of Ultimate Football GM. I really enjoyed this game. Today's episode is brought to you by Ultimate Football GM. You've heard us talk about this mobile game app, and if you've ever thought you'd make a good GM, you got to give this game a try. It's not as easy as you might think to create a dynasty. This is exactly what we're talking about doing in this scenario of where Kansas City has to look, how they're going to do it. This is what you can do in this game. It gives you the ability to go draft your players. It gives you the ability to sign players, sign coaches, all of that. When you play Ultimate Football GM, you get to control and manage every strategic aspect of your team as you play through seasons and lead your team to glory, trying to build a historic dynasty. With Ultimate Football GM, you're responsible for controlling the destiny of your franchise by hiring the right coaches and coordinators, managing all the franchise finances, including negotiating players' salaries and terms, navigating your franchise through free agency, the draft, injuries, player personnel issues, and all the ups and downs of the season. All this in a challenging and realistic game world. Ultimate Football GM is completely free and playable offline. Play on the go as you want and when you want to. Locked On Chiefs listeners get 100% free boost to their franchise when using promo code Locked On, all caps, in the game store. That's Locked On in all caps, so make sure to check it out today. To download the game, just visit ultimate-gm.com or look it up on the app stores. That's ultimate-gm.com. Ultimate Football GM. Start your dynasty today.
This dynasty's rolling, and I just want to help it move along. So there's where the value comes in. And we've talked a lot. Just did an experiment last night for the mock draft for Monday. If you guys didn't see that, go back and check out the mock draft Monday, because we're doing that every Monday up until the draft. And we are here 5 days a week. There's a lot of content around it. But in that scenario, it showed you one of the trade-up options. Doesn't mean it's going to happen. So if you're at 31 and say you had a smaller tier of wide receivers and they've gone, you either weren't able to trade up or you decided not to, whatever it was, and now you're there. So you had a narrow, thin margin up there. I feel like the edges and the tackles in particular are thicker in that top 50, that area between 20 and 40, the kind of gaps where the Chiefs are going to be picking. So it feels like that's going to be a more opportunity if they can't get something done trade-wise. But then as you drop down, I do think that the wide receivers go a little bit deeper than some of those positions, especially into day 3. So the question becomes, if you have value at a group that you're able to pick in your natural position here at 31, does that become more valuable, or do you have to make more adjustments in what you're trying to do in order to fill these gaps? There's 3 big holes on this roster that we feel are driving some of this. And then there's some secondary concerns. So is it about the opportunity, or is it about where that tier is and the quality of player that you're getting, not just what the function could be?
So I think it plays a little bit in Kansas City's favor to have the 3 holes that they do, because to me, the other thing that goes into this, and we haven't really discussed it all, is you get a 5th-year option with these guys. Mm-hmm. With anybody you draft in the first round. That is why the first rounders are so valuable. So even if you're end up taking a guy that you have in the second round because you're drafting at 31, look at the position and say, okay, if you're drafting a future left tackle or even a right tackle, to be completely honest, look at what it costs to have them be, bring in a free agent at that position. That can save you an extra year. I mean, yeah, you're going to have to pay a hefty sum, but it's probably not going to be top of the market like it would be if you had to go out and pay somebody, a couple of years down the road. So having those premium positions that you have needs at kind of works in your favor in the first round. Now you don't want to have that many needs, right? Because now you're sitting there in a situation where you've got 3 needs that you could really use at premium positions, and you don't have 3 first-round picks. So you're going to have to go get somebody. I just look at this, and it's really going to be tough because you start looking at the tackles, you start looking at the defensive ends. there's going to be somebody taken there that probably shouldn't be, but there's also probably going to be somebody that falls because somebody falls every year. And that's the thing that we just don't know is where do the teams value these guys and where are they going to go? That's the other thing. If you would have told me that the Saints were going to trade up for Olave last year, I would have told you you're crazy. They had Michael Thomas. They had other players, but they went and got him anyway. And it looks like a good move for them as a franchise, but they gave up a lot to go get him.
And now they got to get something done next in order to get him the ball. That certainly makes sense. But I think when you come back to it, it's about the fact that the Chiefs lost starters at 3 of the top 5 positions on this club. Obviously, quarterback isn't going anywhere. But if you add wide receiver to the pillar group, that's significant. And so that's why, even though they've made some headway on those, they've made signings. 3 starters, that's significant. So you have to double down. And I think that's where this comes in. If you look at it from a 30,000-foot level, it's not just about what do you do in the first round of 31 and what do you do down at 95. It's about the top 100 players, all that you feel could be starter level at some point in their career. Maybe not as rookies. Those are first round guys. But at some point here in their rookie contract, do you move that around or do you have to prioritize? Because where those clusters lay on the board, I think is what is going to drive the Chiefs' selections here overall.
And I know you're going to think I'm crazy, but I'm going to say it anyway. I do think that Kansas City makes a pick in the first round, regardless of what somebody else could be offering to try to drop out of the first round. I don't think that a club perspective, they want to be in a situation where they don't draft anybody in the first round. You've got all those people in Kansas City there for the draft. I do think that plays into it just a little bit. I'm not going to say it's a huge deal, but I don't think you're going to be looking at Kansas City maybe trading back, because that's the other part of this that would make a lot of sense is if you don't have a guy there that you think really is worth the 31st pick, trade back into the second, see if you can get a couple more second and thirds and get a couple more top 100 guys as opposed to getting just one player. Mm-hmm. I just don't know that that's really an option this year.
Maybe you're right. Maybe I'm underselling it. As long as they make a move, I don't think the fact that it's in KC, every pick's being announced from the same podium all weekend long. So I just don't know that it's that important.
Well, but you're going to have hundreds of thousands. Really, you're going to have thousands. Sorry, not hundreds of thousands, but thousands of people there. Yeah, you're going to have thousands of people there in Kansas City for this draft, and it's going to be a lot crazier than just their normal draft party. So to me, I think it could be real interesting to see what they do, and that's another reason why I feel like it's possible Kansas City's going to make a move to try to go up and get somebody, is because you're on a national stage right now. And to me, the other side of it is we've talked about this too. You're not going to have 12 guys that are going to make this roster from this draft class. Right. Giving up some of your draft picks may be what you need to do to go get a guy that you think can be a blue chip guy. If you have somebody that you think can be maybe a fringe Pro Bowl player, do you trade up and go get him? I would consider it.
There's only room for 12 or 22 of those on a roster. If you don't have someone in that position, why not?
Yeah. But again, when you start looking at the positions that we're talking about, there's not going to be a ton of those guys in the draft, and they're not going to fall much past 20.
Yeah, it's going to be tough.
So you're going to have to give a lot of capital.
Well, and speaking of draft parties, folks, I will be in town. I will drop you in one of the early shows that week, where I'll be probably Wednesday night before the draft. If anybody wants to come out, we can have a little get together. Nothing formal, but
you're not going to be the only one there.
No, I know. I'm not trying to commit you to anything, is what I'm doing here. So I will be doing something somewhere. We'll let all of you know. If you chose to come out and say hello, that's perfectly awesome. We would love that. And it's about as much for us, the location of the draft party, as it is for the Chiefs about the location within the draft itself. It's going to be a fun weekend, and I hope you're right. I hope it's just thousands, maybe hundreds. Hundreds would be great if that's all that there's there that I have to battle.
It's not going to be hundreds. I guarantee it's not going to be hundreds. This is going to be a big event for Kansas City, and I guarantee that this city is really looking forward to showing out in this draft.
I agree.
And quite frankly, think about how much it means to some of the fans of the Chiefs that it's now in Kansas City. Maybe they're going to travel in from out of town. I mean,
all I ask when Chiefs Kingdom is they're louder
thing.
Than Jets. That's all I care about. When those selections are made, be louder than the Jets fans. And then we'll be all good. That'll do it for us today, folks. Make sure you check out another Locked On show for your next one. Check out Locked On NFL Scouting with the Draft Dudes, the Locked On NFL Draft Show with my pals over there. And then, hey, get over to NFL33.com for our work. And that's where my draft board will drop. Get over to rogatebc.com and get the draft guide. Is coming here very shortly. Thank you for your time and patience. We appreciate it. Have a great day. We'll be back with you tomorrow. We're going to get into what are possibilities of picks where in what area and how do they get these things done. Thanks for listening today. We'll talk with you tomorrow.